I liked one old photo, so I liked all 214. It was my crush's photo from 6 years ago. My logic was that one ancient like looked creepy, but 214 likes would look like an obvious joke. Halfway through, she messaged, "Are you okay?" I panicked and said my account had been hacked. She asked why the hacker only liked pictures of her. I told her the hacker had good taste. Somehow, that got me a date. We've been together for 2 years, and she still calls me the hacker. My roommate watched my TV while eating my food. I took both. She had stopped buying groceries months earlier, but kept helping herself to everything I cooked. She left my bowls in her room until they grew mold and laughed whenever I asked her to contribute. When our lease ended, she assumed I would move out and leave the furniture and appliances behind. On moving day, she sat on my couch watching my television with another meal from my refrigerator. I unplugged the TV first. She yelled, "What the hell, I was watching that!" Then I emptied the fridge, packed it into the truck, and said, "And I paid for it." She spent her final night in an empty apartment with warm leftovers. My half-sister planned to wear a wedding dress to my party. I changed one line. She had spent weeks hinting that my engagement celebration needed something memorable. Then a relative warned me she had bought a white bridal gown and planned to arrive late so every camera turned toward her. I did not confront her. I quietly changed the invitation theme to wedding dresses and asked every woman to wear one if possible. Friends borrowed gowns from relatives and thrift stores. When my half-sister made her grand entrance, she froze. The entire room was already full of veils, lace, and white dresses. Nobody stared because she looked exactly like everyone else. She left early and later complained that I had ruined her surprise. He lied on our first date, so I invited him to a full wax. My dating profile had 2 clear deal breakers: no smokers and no people with children. After a 3-hour breakfast, this guy casually admitted he had a child. He had read my profile but said he knew his charm would change my mind. I was furious that he knowingly wasted my time. So I told him I had a full wax appointment next and invited him along, claiming it barely hurt. He agreed. We went together, he screamed through the entire appointment and still finished it. I made him pay for his own wax and never called him again. He returned my dishes covered in rotting food. He forgot I still had his garden. My former roommate borrowed several bowls and pans before moving out. Weeks later, he dropped them at my door, sealed inside a bag. Every dish still contained old food and thick mold. The smell filled the hallway before I even opened it. He ignored my messages and refused to replace anything. Then I remembered his prized herb garden was still sitting on my balcony because his new apartment had no outdoor space. He finally texted asking when he could collect it. I told him the plants had been stored with the same care he gave my dishes. The entire garden went into the trash, and he received a photograph of the empty pots. My husband's ex crashed our wedding. Then my dad asked who hired her. We only invited 10 immediate family members, but she heard about it and announced she was coming anyway. She arrived in a dress so short you could see the tops of her stockings, skyscraper heels, and full nightclub makeup. The second she realized there were no mutual friends to impress, just both families staring at her, she started panicking. My dad quietly asked me, "Who hired a stripper?" I told everyone to be extra nice. Every time she tried to slip out, another relative pulled her into conversation. She spent the ceremony wrapped in her coat, dodging the photographer, while my husband and I had a perfect wedding. My neighbor kept parking in my driveway. I blocked his car and left town. He had his own driveway, but used mine whenever his family visited. I asked him to stop several times. He smiled, apologized, and did it again. One Friday, I came home and found his car there while he was outside talking to friends. So I parked directly behind him, locked my car, and left with my wife for a weekend trip. 10 minutes later, he called, demanding I move it. I told him we were already hours away. He threatened police and towing, but neither could help because my car was legally parked on my property. When we returned Sunday night, his car had not moved once. My girlfriend wanted to date us both, so I took everything I paid for. She admitted she had cheated, then asked if she could keep dating both of us while deciding whom she preferred. I agreed to leave, but nearly everything in our apartment had been purchased by me. When the movers arrived, I packed every item I owned: furniture, kitchenware, television, shower curtain, and even the extra toilet paper. I left her bed, desk, clothes, 2 $5 tables, paper plates, plastic cutlery, and 1 roll. She came home expecting our shared belongings. I reminded her they were mine. A few months later, she was evicted. He stole the parking spot I shoveled. I waited until it froze. A storm buried our street, and I spent 45 minutes digging out one space beside my building. I left for 10 minutes to buy groceries. When I returned, my neighbor had parked there, even though his own car had never moved during the storm. I asked him to switch. He smiled and said, "Street parking belongs to everyone." Fair enough. That night, the temperature dropped far below freezing. I carried several buckets outside and poured roughly 10 gallons of water across his windshield and doors. By morning, his car looked sealed inside clear ice. He spent much longer scraping it free than I had spent shoveling. The next open space stayed mine. My brother-in-law proposed at my wedding. I saved one dance for his. During my reception, he stopped, the music pulled out a ring, and turned our celebration into his engagement announcement. Everyone told me to let it go because the moment was already over. So I smiled and waited. At his wedding, months later, my husband and I requested the same song we had used for our first dance. When it began, we walked onto the floor together, and guests immediately recognized it. The bride started shouting that we were stealing her reception. My husband calmly reminded her that her groom had used ours for a proposal. The room went silent. We finished one dance, thanked the DJ, and sat down. Suddenly, she understood. My old workplace bully was on a date. I introduced myself. I spotted Chris at a bar with a woman I had never seen before. He had bullied me at work, falsely accused me of writing a hostile company review, and cost me freelance jobs. I walked over and greeted him warmly. When his date asked how we knew each other, I told her the truth. Chris turned bright red. Then I asked whether she was Catherine or Georgia, and what had happened to Sarah because someone said he was still dating her last week. Her expression changed instantly. I smiled, said I had clearly put my foot in my mouth, and left. My neighbor parked 10 trucks across our street. I made friends with the Crows. His family used the road like a private lot with 8 or 10 work trucks at once. They rode dirt bikes through my lawn and let their dog leave messes beside my mailbox. Every polite request became an argument. Then I started leaving unsalted peanuts for the local Crows at the same time each morning. Within weeks, they recognized me and gathered whenever I stepped outside. They also gathered above the line of trucks. Soon every roof hood and windshield on that side of the street was covered in crow droppings, while my own car remained strangely clean. My neighbor started washing trucks daily. I kept feeding my friends. He stole my reserved train seat. The conductor's excuse put me in first class. I showed the man my ticket, but he refused to move and told me to find somewhere else. The train was packed, so I asked the conductor for help. He shrugged and said only police could physically remove someone and police would not come over a seat. Fine. I walked into first class, found an empty seat, and sat down. The conductor followed and ordered me back to second class. I calmly repeated his rule. Only police could physically move me and they would not come over a seat. He stared at me, then upgraded my ticket for free. The stranger kept my old seat. I kept a better one. My roommate's girlfriend tried to get me evicted. We made her think she was right. I lived with 3 male friends, and she decided my existence proved I wanted her boyfriend. She photographed me in shared rooms, accused me of stealing, and even took money from our grocery jar. When my roommate finally confronted her, she doubled down. So the next time she visited, we locked his bedroom door, shook the bed, and made suspicious noises. She burst inside, ready to catch us. We were sitting fully dressed on opposite sides of the bed playing Mario Party, while another roommate filmed her entrance. Then we showed everyone the missing grocery money in her bag. My roommate ended the relationship, and she never entered our house again. The venue charged me $200 for cleaning. My photos cost them much more. We cleaned the room ourselves and took time-stamped pictures before returning the keys. 2 days later, the venue claimed we had left garbage everywhere and charged the card on file. They ignored every email asking for proof. So I posted our photos beside their invoice in a detailed public review. Within hours, former customers replied with nearly identical surprise charges. I added their screenshots too. The venue suddenly offered a full refund if I deleted everything. I refused until every person in the thread confirmed they had also been refunded. The charge disappeared, and so did the venue's fake cleaning policy. The review stayed online. My roommates let their partners live with us for free. We moved out while they camped. 3 of us bought the couches, television, dishes, pans, cleaning supplies, and nearly every shared item. The other 2 stopped contributing but moved their partners in anyway. They used our food, filled every room, and acted offended whenever we mentioned bills. Then all 4 of them left for a weekend camping trip. The 3 paying roommates rented a truck and removed every single thing we owned. Furniture, kitchenware, toilet paper, shower curtains, even the trash cans. When the campers returned, they found bare rooms and 1 note saying the lease ended Friday. They called us selfish. We reminded them the empty house contained exactly what they had paid for. He tipped me $2 and accused me of stealing his Audi. I found his key. His group had changed drinks, returned appetizers, demanded discounts, and treated me like dirt through an entire busy shift near Baltimore Harbor. Their bill reached about $130. Before leaving, he told me to find a better job and left $2. Minutes later, I found an Audi key fob beneath his chair. He returned shouting that I had stolen it because I looked like the type. I held the key up and asked whether this was what he meant. Then I walked toward the water and let it drop beyond the railing. He watched it disappear into the harbor while I returned to my tables. My sister-in-law erased my family from her wedding photos. I remembered when it was my turn. Before her wedding, she insisted my parents, siblings, and I buy outfits in her exact colors because she wanted coordinated family pictures. We spent the money and stood through every pose. When the album and video arrived, none of us appeared once. She had deliberately removed our entire side while keeping distant friends and co-workers. She dismissed our questions and said the photographer chose the best shots. Years later, I planned my own wedding. She asked repeatedly about her dress and where she would stand for family photographs. I told the photographer not to include her in a single formal image. When she complained, I said we were choosing the best shots. My boss said if I was late again, don't come in. So I took him literally. A new manager announced that anyone late again should not bother coming in. A few days later, traffic stopped completely after a crash. I called and explained that I would be late. He repeated that I should not come in, so I stayed home. He was furious the next morning, but I forwarded his exact message to HR. Then it happened again, and I followed the same instruction. HR finally made him clarify the policy in writing. Being late meant a warning. It did not mean losing an entire shift. He never used that threat again. Our landlord advertised our equipment as his. We left him exactly what he owned. Our landlord gave the company 7 days to leave and immediately advertised the building with all our equipment included. The photographs showed our machinery, shelves, desks, and even custom fixtures, as if they belonged to him. We asked him to correct the listing. He refused. So during that week, we removed everything the company had bought. Anything that could not be moved was sold or dismantled. When he arrived with prospective tenants, the building was an empty shell. He threatened to keep our deposits until our lawyer showed him every receipt. We recovered the money, and his impressive fully equipped rental disappeared overnight.